Welcome to the Globetrottin ADs. This podcast is for you, athletic directors, activity coordinators, coaches, and program associates based in international schools around the world. The Globetrottin ADs is proudly hosted by Nick DeForest from the American International School Vienna and Matt Fleming from the American International School of Budapest. Here they are now, Nick and Matt and the Globetrottin ADs.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Globetrottin ADs. We're back, and we're happy to be here today. Today, we have a special episode. We're going to talk about a recent current event, phenomenon that's been happening in this region of the world, in Europe, particularly Eastern Europe. We're going to talk about the impact of the invasion of Ukraine on international schools. So joining us today, we're quite lucky that we have some good colleagues we've known for a while who we can relate with and have a good chat with to give us the scoop, give us the story of what's happening. We have Rick Floyd, who's the athletics director from PSI Kiev, and Kirby Boychuk, who's the AD from AAS Moscow. So we want to welcome these guys today. But before we get into it with Rick and Kirby, greetings, Nick, over in Vienna. Good to hear and see from you once again. Sorry we didn't get a chance to catch up in person on the spring break, but we will do something in person before too long, as you know.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, and it was a little spring break for the Globetrottin ADs. We haven't recorded a podcast in quite a while, so I'm glad we're getting at it now with you know an important one, and I think one that all of our friends around the globe may not realize as much. I mean, I'm sure the war is on all the news stations, no matter where you are in the world, but with you and I, Matt, in neighboring countries, so to speak, we're maybe getting a little bit more of it. So I think this is really great for everyone to hear and learn more about what really our whole region is kind of, you know, it's on the top of our minds, and everybody's thinking about it every day where we are. So me, Rick, and Kirby, thanks for joining us today. Welcome.
No worries.
Yeah, you're welcome. Pleasure.
All right. Well, we, Matt, you said there, you know, PSI Kiev AD and AAS Moscow AD, and neither of you are in those places right now. So, Rick, why don't you just start and first tell us where you're at?
Sure. Right now I'm sitting in Breza, about an hour out of Bucharest in Romania, thanks to a wonderful friend of mine and a CISA AD, Mr. David Hughes.
All right. And are you with him, or is this another house that he has?
No, I'm not with him. He's in actually Bucharest, close to the American International School of Bucharest. So this is his second home. Nice little home. I have my wife and my daughter and granddaughter and another PSI colleague and her son, who we managed to help get out of Ukraine as well.
Wow, great. Well, I think we're going to hear more about those kind of situations as we go through today. Kirby, how about you?
Well, I'm hanging out at one of my old schools. I used to work in Addis Ababa at the International Community School, and when everything started happening and our school made the call for us teachers to leave Moscow, we reached out to our good friends in ICS Addis Ababa, and we got on an airplane and flew to Ethiopia. So for the last 2 months, my wife and I have been on location in sunny and warm Addis Ababa.
Wow, it's 2 months. It's hard to believe that it's already been 2 months long. Wow. Well, I don't know where to start. I think maybe before you left, or when you got the news that something was going to change your day-to-day situation, I think is where I'm interested to hearing that. Maybe Rick, you can go first, if you don't mind.
So actually our school had quite a bit of information beforehand, starting in November, and they took some plans by approaching a professional company in Europe to do a report on our school and how things should be and what should be happening and so on. And then gradually, as things moved along, the embassies started giving advice to their citizens to make decisions of staying or going. In particular, the American embassy, followed by the UK, followed by Australia and a couple others like the Canadian. They gave advice for the citizens to leave. And that was still 2 or 3 weeks out. But of course, most of our teachers who are from those nationalities started to get a little bit nervous and concerned. So our school decided that, yeah, of course, if you need to go, we would support you and help you out with those situations. So I'm actually married to Ukrainian, so a bit more difficult for me with my family being Ukrainian and having a young 1-month granddaughter at the time when this all started. So my decision was to stay. And obviously, I believe also the Ukrainian government politicians, Mr. Zelensky, who's quite famous quite now, was saying, please stop stressing out your citizens in Ukraine. Everything's going to be okay. It's not going to happen. We've got plenty of time. That was some of the messages that were happening at the start of the whole situation.
So about what time were folks leaving PSI? Like maybe before February 24th, or was it around, what's the timeline for that when people actually started leaving the country that worked at your school?
So actually that February the 24th was our actual mid-semester break. Some of you call it your ski break or winter break. And so the week before that, our school still had 50% of staff to run both on campus and online. The week before that, about 75% of our staff had left to go back to homes or in their own countries or to other countries close by. So about 2 weeks before the invasion actually took part, we were down to a very small staff of expats and just had local staff on board.
Wow. And what were the numbers like in the classes at that point? That's the staff, but
actually quite high.
Wow.
Yeah. We still had at least 50 to 60% of students coming to school. The rest were doing online wherever they were. That's why the school actually decided to go completely online, but then they did a survey and realized that the numbers still in Ukraine were quite high. So we then had to open the campus up and allow students to come on. And we still had some expats coming, but mostly the local students.
Well, let's jump over. We definitely want to come back, to that situation after it all kicks off. But Kirby, maybe we'll jump a couple weeks in the timeline here. But how did it happen at your school?
Well, it was kind of interesting. We were, Rick and I were actually talking together because we were planning and co-hosting the Kiev-Moscow CISA first ever virtual sport swim meet. So we were all excited about that. And I think I phoned Rick the morning that the conflict, the situation broke out. I have to use those words. I was actually on break on the 24th. And I was talking to Rick and he goes, can't really talk to you much right now. Got to go. So we talked for a few minutes and then off he went. And that was, I think, of Thursday, if I remember correctly. And then Sunday, we had a big staff meeting at our school. Director said, we're just going to move forward. We're going to keep everything the way things are going. Everything in Moscow was, business as usual. And then I think about an hour after we got off the call, we got an email coming out saying that the U.S. Embassy has requested that all their staff leave, and the school made the call to ask their foreign hire teachers to depart the country based on flight availability and closing skies and sanctions and possible SWIFT code, all the other stuff that was coming in. So they gave us a couple days to regroup, and I think we were out on Wednesday of the following week. And they gave us a week to kind of find some place in Europe. We all kind of thought we were going to be back in a couple of weeks. But like I said, it's now 2 months, and it's definitely going to be 3 and 4 months before anything ends up, we won't be going back. So that's kind of another issue. That's maybe next part of the story. So.
Well, what about safety? Just before you, I don't think you mentioned. Was there any start? Did you start to feel unsafe as a foreigner in Moscow before you
No,
left there?
no,
No.
not at
Okay.
all. Not at all.
Yeah, I guess if they're not getting the info of really what's happening, then there's no real. But that's another. That's for CNN to talk about. I think maybe. But yeah.
It was incredibly. It was safe. It was normal. There was nothing really happening. I mean, I guess if you became ultra sensitive, people started thinking, mentioning, if you were walking down the street and you were talking English, people started looking at you, and then you were kind of going, hey, whenever we're walking down the street and we're talking English, people are looking at us. So it's I think people were becoming a little ultra sensitive, but I don't think my view, there was never any feeling of anything negative happening.
So just to recap, Kirby, so you had a staff meeting on a Sunday and the director said, all good, we're going to push forward. And then shortly after that same day, a couple hours later, you were told that it was time to get going.
Yes. Yeah. They said,
What a turnaround.
Yeah. Things happen fast, right?
Yeah.
Like
So
we all know.
not just staff, but all families, expat families as well.
That's the school made their call, right? I mean, they used the information from the U.S. Embassy, the Canadian Embassy, because I'm Canadian. They didn't say anything for another week or so, but the school made the call that they said, all foreign hire teachers should go, and that was their advice. So we went with it.
Yeah, sure.
And do you know about how many people left, or in terms of staff, or like what the percentage was that actually left, or is there anybody still there?
Yeah, there's probably a good handful of foreign hires that are still there, and they are either married to a Russian or they've just thought, nah, I'm going to stay. So I'm going to say there's less than 10.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then our normal regular local hire staff.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's jump back over, Rick. So after, let's say, everyone else cleared out, you mentioned how you stayed longer with your family. So what was your situation for the next, I think, 2 weeks till you actually left the country?
Yeah, pretty much. That week of the spring break, my wife and I were going about normal things in Kiev. Things felt normal. We were still getting information about an invasion coming, in particular from the American intelligence. It was going to be in the next 48 hours. That 48 hours did pass, but the Americans did say it was going to come in the next 24 or so on. And they were pretty much right. They were spot on. My wife and I were taking steps such as we purchased some one-way tickets from Kiev to Spain in case we needed to get out quickly and we had the time to do so. A lot of our staff were actually told that a week and a half, 2 weeks ago as well, to help them prepare.
Mm-hmm.
And then the night before the invasion started, my wife needed to get our cat to have the chip put in place. So she went driving to the other side of Kiev, basically to the areas called Irpin and Bucha, which you might have heard of quite recently. So she came back home, and of course there wasn't much petrol in the car. So we had planned on that Thursday morning to go and get petrol to have it ready for us to leave, because I was talking about maybe going to Lviv in the west of Ukraine just for a break to finish the end of the holidays before going back to work either online or on campus, depending on the situation. Basically that Thursday, the 24th, about 4:45 a.m. in the morning, I heard this strange noise out the back of our apartment. We're on the 10th floor of a 25th story building. And I sort of heard it and thought, oh yeah, okay, that's strange, different. And I just went back to sleep. And then another one again. I thought, okay, that's really different. I need to get up and check this. So I went to the back windows, and as I opened the curtains, there was another one, and I could see the bomb landing and making the explosion and the sound and the vibrations on the window in the building that I was in. So obviously I realized that the invasion had started. At that point, I turned. My wife had also woken up at that stage, and basically I said, I think we need to check our phones and our computers for information. And so we did, and basically things were happening. And about the next 10, 15 minutes, we were just in shock. We just didn't believe it was happening. Right. And then we looked out the front windows, and we could just see people everywhere with suitcases, cars lined up in the streets, just trying to get out of Kiev. Wow. So at that point, I decided, well, we're not going to get out. We didn't have petrol in the car like we planned to have. So we decided to go up to the school. So we packed some things, and I went to the school, and we spent the first 8 nights there, basically in the pool basement area. We have a pool underneath our gym, and down there is a basement area, quite safe and sound. The school had stocked up with military food, a satellite phone for internet connection. We had all the report done and given to our leadership team, and we went through it and made sure everything was ready for people to stay there. We had 3 expats still in Ukraine. Another one of them was married to a Ukrainian, and the other one was, her husband was a Brazilian chef at the embassy. Mm-hmm. So we were there. There's about 50 people, mostly locals of kids and their security, cleaners, those sort of people in their immediate family. Wow. Basically, everyone was shocked that it was Kiev that they attacked first. We were hearing much more information that being Odessa, the south, and being on the Black Sea. So Kiev wasn't really ready for it or prepared for those bombs that were hitting Hostomel airport, which is just outside. Mm-hmm. So those bombs were hitting 70, 80 kilometers away from where I was living, but we could see and hear and feel the vibrations.
Yeah.
Wow. And what was the day-to-day? I mean, obviously it's, not the easiest thing to talk about, and it's great that you're telling everybody now, but so if you don't want to tell too much, obviously we understand, but just what was a day-to-day like with those 50 people? Were you getting out during the day and checking things out, or?
Yeah, so I must admit it was tough to talk about, probably up until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it's more comfortable now. I can see it as an experience that I will never forget, and I hope I never have to deal with again in my life. We're in the 21st century, and you don't really think about these things, really, do you? Right. And day to day, obviously, to start with, we were just still pretty much in shock, checking the internet, watching the local news, talking to friends and family, checking they're okay as much as possible. There was local staff coming and going, because some of the local staff had small village homes outside of Kiev. So once we learned where the Russians were focusing their attacks on, they were able to move around in other directions to get away from the school and get out of Kiev. We started to focus on our family, obviously my daughter, who had just got married, and her husband had just come back from overseas work on a cruise ship, and he was in Netherlands trying to get back to Ukraine to be with his wife and his daughter, who was only a month old. He got to Warsaw and then got across the border and then went to Odessa, basically. Okay. And Ukrainian men, about the 4th day, I think, they made martial law that no Ukrainian man between the ages of 18 and 65 were allowed to leave the country, and unless they had some special reasons. So he basically was now stuck in Ukraine. Wow. As he still is now, with a couple of my brother-in-laws and one of my wife's uncles. He's over 65. He could have left, but he chose to stay. So we focused on getting my daughter and granddaughter from Odessa in the south to Moldova. And it was a fairly short trip, but also obviously risky as well. We had some family friends who helped get some accommodation in Moldova, also for my wife's twin sisters and her mother, so my mother-in-law, and we got them all to Moldova. Once they were pretty much safe, we basically then, my wife woke up the next morning and said, right, we're going. I said, okay, let's try and get some petrol. So we went outside, and in that time we were going outside to get some things from our apartment as well. Basically, there were some curfews on people, but basically you could move between 7 o'clock in the morning and 5 p.m. If you heard a siren, of course, you would run as quickly as possible to the nearest shelter. So my apartment was fairly close to the school, so I was able to move okay. We did, at one point, myself and the other expat and American teacher, IB coordinator, went and helped get an expat family out of the apartments near the school because they were having problems getting food and things. So we went out and brought them to the school. At this stage, the Brazilian teacher and her husband had organized with the Brazilian embassy to leave via convoy through a train from Kiev to Lviv and then out of the country. So Ukraine started offering free trains out of Kiev out to Lviv in the west, because basically the west wasn't being, at that stage, bombed at all. It was basically Kiev in the east. At that stage, we had gone down to about 30 staff, and a couple more came and a couple more left, mostly local staff. Mm-hmm. And we were helping some of our local staff who had chosen to stay in Kiev. The school, we're helping them get in touch with convoys and get out of Kiev because it was difficult in some places. Some of our staff were actually living in Irpin and Bucha that were being attacked. There's some pretty horrific stories. They basically were living and sleeping in basements. People were living in metro stations. Funny enough, they were built by the Russians, the old Soviet Union, many years ago, as protection against invasion from the West, and now they're being used as protection against the Russians. Yeah, so it's just incredible how it comes around. We went for petrol, and we struggled to find petrol basically everywhere because there was checkpoints all the time. And about 20 minutes later, we got to another checkpoint, and they started to harass me because I was a male. I was within that age group, and I had to get out of the car. They had to pat me down and search me, and I had to show my passport, say that I was Australian. Yeah. So they didn't. And that was done about 4 or 5 times, and at that point, I was starting to get a little bit freaked out. And the air siren went, so he said, "No, let's go back to the school," and we will recoup and re-sort out what we're going to do. And we drove around a corner about 500 meters from our school. In the middle of the road was a shot-out, blown-out minivan. My wife was driving at the time, and that just freaked us out. So we went back to the school in the shelter, and just next 2-3 hours just calmed ourselves down because we saw this vehicle blown out in the middle of the road. No idea how it happened or when it happened. So we decided to then look at train situation, and there was information that you can buy a ticket, but we went online and we couldn't find anything. It was basically go down the station and get yourself on a train when the trains turned up. And there was no timetable schedule because the Ukrainian train officials were trying to keep it very secret and quiet, so they didn't have a risk of being bombed. And you may have seen some pictures showing from World War II, people trying to get on trains, and the same situation in Kiev and Lviv as well. But at that point, they made an announcement that no males were allowed to go on trains because it was taking seats away from women and children, which I completely agree with. So that didn't become an option for us. Mm-hmm. That night, somehow, there was a message from my school director saying there's a convoy from the UN leaving tomorrow morning at 8:30. Anyone want to go on it? Add your name to this document. So I contacted her and said, look, we haven't got any petrol. We're going to try and get on this convoy. Can you give us the details? We rang them. They said, yep, we'll take care of you. We'll get you petrol. No problems. We'll get petrol when we get there. So we were all sorted out for that. We packed our things, ready to go. We told the final expat who was on campus, David, what was happening. So he could probably come with us or whatever. But he chose to stay there because his wife has a son in Kiev and she wanted to stay. So he stayed. We managed to get 10 liters of petrol from my wife's security car park place. The guy there, an elderly man, very nice. He found some petrol. So we went and got that sorted out. And my school director siphoned the petrol out of the school car. She forgot about it and she told us. So I siphoned it out and that got us up to about 30 liters in total because the UN convoy didn't have any petrol for us. They rang us back and said, sorry, we can't get you any.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, that night was pretty crazy, sleeping night. We got up, went to the UN convoy at this hotel. We got the message about where it was. There was many different convoys organized, but it was a little bit disorganized because it was a last-minute thing. At that stage, they hadn't done a lot of convoys. We actually lost our convoy in the first 15 minutes. The car in front of us basically was in the wrong convoy. They stopped. Of course, we had to stop. We couldn't get out and around them through the checkpoint. So we then had to try and catch up to our convoy. We eventually did, but along the way, we just jumped in many different convoys to help us with our flashing lights. The cars had signs, the South Korean convoy and so on. We had to drive south, then west, then south, then north, and then west. 56 hours later, 1,600 kilometers, we arrived in Romania, Bucharest, at David's place.
Wow.
6 hours.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The things I saw along the way, I will never hope to see again in my lifetime, especially within 50 to 100 kilometers of Kiev. It was just basically missile damage all the way. We had to stay overnight in Vinnytsia on the way because of the curfew. We got there and there was actually the very first siren for Vinnytsia. And it was strange because the people in Vinnytsia didn't run or didn't move anywhere. So we actually continued filling up our car and we went inside the service station and had something to eat before finding a place to sleep. We ended up in a 1-bedroom place with my wife's cousin's second removed brother and his wife in a 1-bedroom with our cat for the night. And the next day we picked up Val and her son from another city. She was actually on holiday in Kamenets, kind of in the middle towards the west of Ukraine. The day that the invasion started, she basically was going to come back to Kiev. Her parents obviously rang her and said, don't stay there. So I heard about that and I said, jump in with us. We got 2 seats and we brought her here with us.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, who would have thought as you're planning through your regular situation in a school, working in an international school, then all of a sudden you have to prepare to kind of just get out to save your life in a way. So that's a lot to take in, Rick. And I'm just, I'm glad you made it out. I'm glad you and your family are safe and that you made it out. And it's quite the story. And thank you for sharing it so much. And as we move forward now, I guess, how is your school functioning now, or what's the situation? And maybe Kirby, you want to jump in now, or if you're there, because I know you're having a little bit of internet trouble. Are you there, Kirby?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So, going to where we are now, what's your school like now, or what's school life happening? How is school life happening these days?
Well, at AS Moscow, there was a call made a couple of weeks ago where they were asking teachers who would be coming back based on the various situations that have happened. And in the last 2 months, we've heard about all the sanctions that were put on by the EU and parts of the world on Russia. And And that definitely has an effect, not only, of course, on the government, but on the common regular folk, right?
Yeah.
So you think about all the people that you've heard about that are working at the McDonald's and at the IKEAs and all these other places who've Pepsi and Coca-Cola, all these places who've been suspended, who are just regular people. That now has an effect. And those people, those families that used to have those managers at our schools, they're gone. So there was the sanctions for the wiring of the money and the fluctuation and devaluation of the ruble. So there were questions that were asked, 4 weeks ago, would you be coming back as teachers? And so people had to answer yes or no, or maybe, based on the current situation, because the school has to move forward and make plans for next year. And there's a large percentage of the teachers that said they would not come back. Based on the way things are going, not able to wire money out of the country. Our school is no longer a U.S. Embassy school. As of August 1st, we became a NKO or an NGO, so we were getting paid in rubles. And so a lot of people made the call to say, no, we can't make that commitment, right?
Yeah.
So the school ended up deciding to not offer high school. They could offer a K-8 program, but they could not offer a 9 through 12 program because they don't have the IB teachers, and looking for local people within Moscow to fill that void was not an option. It just didn't have that. They didn't have that capability. Right. So that's where we're at right now. So the school will be opening as a K-8 school next year, but there will not be a high school. And they're hoping that, within time, things will go back to some sort of normalcy, and we'll be able to have a grade 9 school maybe in 2024, and then maybe grade 10, 11, and 12, and build it back up.
Right. Wow. That seemed for a good reason, but to be decided quite quickly. I mean, I think that's good for also the students, or the families, that they can look elsewhere and know they have to find a new school, right?
Well, that was an important call, right? Because the kids, just like in Ukraine, I mean, they left the country. So I know a lot of CISA schools opened up their doors and gave that opportunity for kids to go to attend their school, and a lot of schools allowed that, tuition free, to finish up their grade 12 or their high school, whatever it was. There are some schools in Moscow that's remained open, and there were kids who are, transferring over to those other IB schools. So there's they do have those options that are available to them. So people have been very open, with the kids from KIS and PSI as well as from AF. So
right.
That's been the positive side. People opening up their arms and letting people in.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's stay with you, Kirb. What are you actually doing right now? I mean, not there's nothing happening, but I mean, with the online school and no high school next year, what are some of the things that are keeping you busy?
We are actually running. So from an athletic standpoint, we're actually running a spring season. There are probably 60% of the kids still in Moscow, still attending school. The school is open right now, K-8. If you're in the country or you're in the city, classes are going. There's the national or teachers who are Russian or who stayed are teaching K-5 in school. Right. The rest of everybody else is DL. Mm-hmm. If you are a high school, middle schooler, or a high schooler, and you're in the country, we've got sports going right now. Spring season, we've got every day we've got 27 kids playing volleyball, probably 20 kids playing tennis. We've got a softball season happening. We've got some cross country happening right now. So we're actually running a sports program. So, and we just found out, we just got permission to have some games. So we have a couple of our local coaches who are also members of clubs. Mm-hmm. We're bringing in their teams to play some clubs. So the kids who are in Moscow, whose companies or families didn't make them, they didn't have to leave yet, or they're not leaving, are having that opportunity. And I do have to say they're incredibly grateful for it, because it breaks up that, additional stress that they have of not having their their friends. And I can't compare this to what's going on in Ukraine at all. But I mean, for what's happening with them, they have, it's a good thing for them to be able to get to school and play sport, right? That was the biggest thing. It's amazing how the athletic program and activities is now so important, because that was the first thing they wanted to make sure that they got pushed out there, to make sure the kids had something to do. Middle school and high school aren't going to school, but 3:30, be at that school, and we've got 100+ kids participating in something, and elementary school clubs and activities are happening as well too. So it's a positive in that respect. That we're able to continue doing something.
Well, that is great to hear for them, and totally unexpected to hear that right now, and I'm sure people listening as well. But that's great that the people that are there can have some fun and run around like that. But you alluded to it. It's definitely not nowhere in comparison to where Ric's at and the other QSI Kiev and every other school in Ukraine, I would imagine. But so Ric, what's day-to-day life for your students? Is it all online?
So for our students at the moment, it's online if they wish to. They were, of course, given the opportunity, as Kirby mentioned, to take up scholarships in a lot of our CISA schools, which is fantastic. There is so many of our students across the countries bordering Ukraine and further, and they're getting scholarships. Some of them who went home to their home countries have enrolled back in their previous schools or public schools. And some of them are choosing to do a mixture of both, a hybrid, face-to-face in the school and still doing some lessons in PSI, because our staff who left earlier are actually teaching across 4 time zones. Wow. So we have staff over in the Americas, South Americas as well. We have staff in Europe. We have staff in Asia. So we have staff close to the Ukrainian time zone as well. So it's an opportunity for them to still be a part of their PSI school. And they enjoy seeing their friends. That the social connection, as Kirby mentioned, is so important in athletics, but it's also just important online at the moment for them to catch up with where their friends are and around the world. Mm-hmm. For me, with athletics, it's very difficult. After 2 years of the pandemic, the students really don't want to be doing anything to do with athletics online anymore. Kirby mentioned we had that joint CISA virtual swim tournament, which was the first one that CISA was trialing, and it worked out quite well. We unfortunately didn't get a chance to swim in our own pool and submit our times. So it was difficult, but we completed it. Now I'm just giving the opportunities for students to do some online quizzes. I have office hours where they can come along and just talk to me about anything they want to talk about. Cool. I've had some of my student agency groups do some work about the future, what they would like to see happen next. I do some online courses through the NFHS. I go through there and pick out ones that are suitable for students and free for them to do online if they'd like to do that. And we have some little activities, physical challenges where they can earn house team points for their house teams. So some things, but very small in comparison to what we normally do for athletics.
Sure. Yeah, really. And now in terms of like the school, I guess, updating, or, is there like a weekly check-in, or in terms of like what's happening or what the plan is going forward, or is it all just totally contingent on what the world structure is going to be down the road?
Yeah, well, like Kirby mentioned, the school had to give the parents information and staff. So our school did offer to release teachers from our contracts, and a lot of staff started looking, and the school contacted Search Associates, ISSS, Shoal, and they were very good and helped us get access to our accounts without having to pay, because it obviously wasn't our situation, our fault that we're in this situation. But the school, after discussing the core leadership team with the board, we're very determined to make sure that PSI survives the 22-23. And what they've done is basically, through a series of surveys, identified that a lot of our families actually relocated to Warsaw or Poland in particular. And they have now started the plans for a PSI Warsaw campus for the 2022-2023. They've started enrollments just 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago, for any students who would like to do face-to-face learning in Warsaw. And also they've created a partnership with Avenues, an online educational company around the world, based out of the Americas. And students can choose also to enroll in PSI doing that program. And Pajama, I believe that's how you say it, the IB has also agreed for our IB students to do that online as well for 22-23. So PSI is moving forward to have those plans for the next school year. At this stage, I don't know what the numbers are like in relation to enrollments. They were expecting, based on surveys, somewhere between 55 to 75 face-to-face students to start.
Well, that's positive news to hear, because you got to, you're the spirit of your school community will carry forward no matter where it is, I guess. And you got to think there's some traditions and there's some connections, definitely some connections that are alive and well, even though you're not there in the city of Kiev. So I'm happy to hear that, and I hope that it works forward. And at some point, of course, down the road, your school community will come back to Kiev, come back to your school building, and pump that life back into the program that you guys have all worked so hard to make happen. And the same with Kirby. I really do hope this is not a permanent thing for your schools, and that it's hard to believe that in terms of CISA that you guys are going to be off the radar for a little while. We don't know how long for, but I got to hope and think that the hard work you guys have put in your school programs will remain there in spirit, and that it'll come back in some form down the road if this all susses out, hopefully in a peaceful way at some point.
Well, Matt, I think you said that the best. That's exactly what we're hoping. I was talking with my wife earlier today, and I was going, I understand what's going on in the world. I understand what's going on in Moscow, and then I haven't yet blended that into the reality of what's happening with the school program, because at the end of the day, I'm separating everything, and I'm still thinking about the kids, and I'm still thinking about the program, and I'm still thinking about some of the seniors, and then the grade 11s and the grade 10s. And it took quite a while, everything aside, it took quite a while to figure out, even if I was to go back to Moscow next year, if I had that opportunity, it's going to look different. We were worried about rebuilding culture after COVID, and how we were going to teach kids again what it means when a referee calls this, and what it means when the coach calls you guys over and has to talk to you. And, oh my Lord, we had to do all that. We thought that was going to be a big culture change. This is completely, I can't even wrap my head around it right now, not having a high school. Not what are you going to do with 250 kids in a school where you had such a strong culture and program before? You got to rethink it, and that's going to be somebody else's job. And I hope that there's enough left there, and that whoever's taking over and whatever transition it's going to be, I hope they're going to be able to continue on with that penguin spirit at the school, and it's going to keep building and growing for the next generation of kids. And they take this opportunity to really create a level of culture and history, and build something incredibly positive from it for those kids at these schools when they do come back. And they will. I'm sure they will. I'll be traveling back actually to Moscow in about a week and a half to do a transition with my department. And actually the last high school athletic awards ceremony. We're actually going to put one on. We're going to do a virtual one. We're going to do it in person. We were doing an induction for our 7 kids who went off to play at universities. So this was going to be our first year we're actually inducting these kids into our wall of fame.
Cool.
And so unless something goes very strange here in the next, 10 days, I'll be back in Moscow, trying to wrap this all up for the next group of kids and the next school year. So that's going to be something that I'm hopefully be able to do.
Yeah. It'll be great to get some closure, at least for you personally, right? Before you move on.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, you guys, you talked, we mentioned other countries, right? Obviously the neighboring countries taking that influx of not just your students, but, the mass of people across the borders and so much happening. I'm one country away and, it's constant news and people coming here. I've got to know a lot of people that have fled out of the Ukraine and, the Vienna schools, we're not doing too much really, as we will hear from Matt in a second. But, we have 12 new students at our school that have come from Belarus, from your school, Kirby, and from your school, Ric, as well. And I think every Vienna school has a few people come in, as well as all the local schools have opened up to, I think, something like 50,000 students from the Ukraine. And, from an international school to an international school, that's one thing. But from a Ukrainian school to an Austrian school, where maybe you don't know English, you only speak Ukrainian, and then you're coming to a school that's in German, lots of unique situations, I think. But Austria being a very welcoming country, I think they're doing a great job. But I want to put the focus on the co-host here, Matt, for a second, and have you talk about all the stuff that your school is doing. Because not only are you just taking it internationals, you have a whole separate program set up at your school, a school within a school. So just let everybody know what's going on.
Yeah, sure. So, it all happened. It's amazing how fast it happened and how well it came together in a way, because one of our new colleagues, she doesn't work at our school, but basically what's happened is there was so many folks that were coming out of Ukraine to Hungary that there was a handful of folks who are colleagues of Ric's who are connected to our school from one of Ric's previous colleagues. She's now my colleague. She's our middle school counselor. Her name's Felina Hart. And so Felina had this connection with some folks who were actually in Hungary when the invasion started, and they couldn't go back to Kiev, obviously. So they reached out to her, and Felina quickly reached out to our school community, the colleagues that she could kind of reach out in terms of thinking she found some people who would open their doors, I guess. And anyway, so she asked folks to take in these people that were stranded here in Hungary. And we said, sure, absolutely. It was no problem for us because we have plenty of our space in our house. We have an extra bedroom now. My son's away to the U.S. in college. We have an office we were able to convert into another living room or bedroom space. So we took in 4 Ukrainian folks that are friends of Felina's. One of them worked with Ric at PSI, and they ended up staying with us for about 5 weeks. So out of that, in terms of the school developing, one of them who wasn't staying with us, or another colleague, her name's Oksana, she was able to get a school within a school going at AISB. And so what that basically is that Ukrainian kids who are in Hungary or had fled Kiev or Ukraine to come to Hungary, and they're here now in Budapest area for the time being. So the kids had no school to go to. So it started off as a school for Ukrainian kids at our school, and it started off with about 20 kids, I want to say 25. And so our school opened our doors and our spaces. So basically from their school starts around 12:30, I believe, with a lunch period. And then as the day goes on and spaces open up during the day and for the after school program, once our kids leave, there's more classroom spaces available. So we were opening those spaces up for these Ukrainian school. And very quickly that school went from 20 kids to, within a few days, it went up to 40. then it went up to 50, 70, and now they're like at about 90 kids that we have in our building that are part of the Ukrainian school. We call it a school within a school program. So it's amazing how quickly it's taken off, how well organized it is. And Ric's colleague, Oksana, her name's Oksana, she's the one who heads this up. And Oksana's just amazing how organized she is, how driven she is, how passionate she is to make sure kids are receiving education away from their home area back in Ukraine. So it's been in place now for about 2 months, just over, I believe. And I've been impacted by it because we have to juggle our spaces. In terms of like the after school activity program, we're providing them sports spaces for the kids who want to do after school activity programs. We have my colleagues, school at our ASB teachers and parents who are volunteering their time after school to provide sport activities for them or other activities, or simple things like just taking them on a hike up in the woods or providing a floor hockey activity. We've opened up the swimming pool for them after school. So it's been, like I said, it's been amazing to see how this is all formed in this short amount of time. And they're great kids to have around. They've been a part of our in-house programs as well a little bit. We had a big games night, or like a casino. It's like a fundraiser for our NFHS, or sorry, our National Honor Society. Mm-hmm. And those kids were able to take part in that as a Friday night activity where we had like a poker night / games. They could come in and play, and it was like a fundraiser. So it's been great to see. It's been very interesting for sure. Some extra work, but the fact that these kids are benefiting from it, and to see the colleagues that they're bringing in to work with these Ukrainian kids has been very impressive and great to see.
Well, that's great.
That's a lot, but it's I'm not even scratching the surface with what I just blabbered off there in the last 2 minutes, but it's unbelievable to see what's been happening.
And I know our good friend Mark, and lots of fundraising and trips to the border and lots of things. I think, Ric and Kirby and Matt, we all mentioned like the CISA community kind of coming together and at least offering places for people to come in. I believe all those students don't have to pay at all within CISA for this year, which is, I think, a given. But anyway, I think it's good that the community comes together, because we're not just there to play sports against each other. We always said it's bigger than sports, the connections and everything. So I think, of course, in a situation like this, the least all of the other CISA schools could do is, open their doors and do anything possible. But let's talk about CISA for a second. We were just kind of coming out of COVID, Kirby, as you mentioned, maybe getting back to athletics, and now two main players of you two, plus QSI Kiev, another big school in Kiev, will be off the athletic radar, so to speak, for the next year. Especially even if you can travel, Ric, it would be not hosting, that's for sure. Even if PSI Warsaw gets some teams together, which would be pretty cool, we wouldn't be hosting. So what do you guys think about the future of our conference? I don't know who wants to go first, but kind of impact. Kirby, you're on the executive. What do you think?
Well, only for another month or so.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, you guys got a tough row to. I think you're going to have a lot of changes. What I see anyway in the future. I think after COVID and after this, there's an opportunity here to. Well, it's just going to present itself the way it is. I think it's going to look a lot different. And people are really going to have to open up their minds to see how the league can work, and think outside the box. Maybe it's not going to be as traditional as it used to be, but I think it just will end up looking a lot different. Yeah. And in order for it to work, people just have to be very flexible, and it's going to be interesting. I'd kind of like I'm going to be following along as I'm sitting in Canada next year, just to keep in touch and see what you guys are doing. But it's definitely going to look different, and it's going to be a challenge, I think, for you guys. For the people that are in Eastern Europe, if you're still able to travel and do that kind of stuff, and things don't get any bigger than they are, you just might be able to keep playing and doing. Whoever can play, whoever can travel, will get to who they can get to, and play some games. Call it a CISA tournament if you can. I don't know. We'll see.
What about you, Rick? I mean, with that school maybe in Warsaw, maybe you've already talked about it a little bit, or what do you think the future holds?
Yeah, I agree with Kirby. I think things are going to change quite a bit, and people are going to have to be flexible. I think after COVID for 2 years, we saw excitement about the possibility of coming back into athletics or face-to-face activities as well, possibly. But I think there's going to be some very wary parents out there, not only just not being able to send them to Ukraine or Russia, but just traveling on planes. We've had a few serious incidents in the air just before the invasion as well, and it started to make people think. There's also the environment. We've been talking about the impact of traveling so much on planes recently as a CISA group,
right?
And I think this now is also going to be a big part of our future plans for CISA. And I think families, parents in particular, of their 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old middle school age group children are going to think a lot more about sending their students internationally. I think we might have a change between middle school and high school scenarios, perhaps. That might be something that we need to consider.
I agree with Rick. I'd be surprised if middle school still has the same presence as it's done in the past. I mean, we're one of the few leagues in the world that actually does have their middle school kids travel, and that could revert back to just more local stuff, just for that parent safety feeling. I would agree with Rick on that.
And I'm thinking housing too. Once it goes, I mean, clearly we're not going to house next year. Haven't been housing this year for those of us that are playing, like my school, and not planning on it next year. But then after 4 years of no housing, that culture's gone, right? To probably never come back.
How do you revive that?
Yeah. Well, another impact is the actual price increase. The invasion is affecting the economy, not only just in our countries that are part of the war, the invasion, but every other country. The cost of flights and things is going to go up because of the access to resources. It's going to be a big impact in costs of flights, cost of staying in hotels.
Yeah. For us, even though we're just next door, I feel very fortunate in terms of what we're able to do in our school, in our region, in our program, because we've been able to have normal seasons in the fall and the spring, not the normal CISA kind of activities where we're able to go away and host for our usual tournaments, but we've been able to do quite a bit in Budapest, and now we're in the spring season. We're going to try to get out to Bratislava and over to Vienna here this week. But what it holds for the future in terms of CISA, it's really hard to look into a crystal ball and say what's going to happen. I think we'll get a little more clarity. I know the directors are meeting here in a few weeks, so maybe we'll get some more information in terms of how the league's going to move forward. But I think a lot of it is still up in the air, so we'll just have to kind of hang and see what develops. So on to the next point, and then we'll kind of bring it home here. This has been a good one, guys. I really want to say thanks for all this information. I've been hanging on, just listening to every word. It's quite the story both you guys have been able to tell with us, and I appreciate everything for you coming on for today and giving us the time. But I just want to ask, you guys have kind of touched on it a little bit in terms of personal plans. So what are you guys thinking for next year? Kirby, maybe we'll go back to you. You kind of hinted a little bit, but maybe you want to tell now what's your personal plan for next year?
Well, the personal plan is after 27 years of living overseas, my wife and I made the decision that we are going to be returning back to Canada. And we are going to be heading to the East Coast, where our summer home is. And we are going to reconnect with our family. My father's 85. Our oldest daughter's 28. Daughter number 2 is 27, and the youngest one is 24. They all lived overseas, and they all want their parents to come home, and they'd love to have us around. And when we had our big family meeting 2 weeks ago, where we were talking to them about whether or not we should still look for a job overseas or not, or come home, and they started smiling and grinning and going, "You guys need to come home." You know, if you think that the kids needed help when they were going through teenagehood, right, and being young, they also need, third culture kids. We get, swept up in this life. They also need help adulting, and that's not saying that we're telling them what to do, but it's, invite them for a coffee every once in a while, go have them over for dinner. And we haven't had that. We haven't had that for 27 years. And we're getting really excited about being able to have our first Canadian Thanksgiving back in Canada with our family in 27 years. Not sure if this is only going to be for 1 year. I've got some properties back in Canada. I don't have a problem at all, shoveling snow and taking care of the gardens and stuff like this, and going to a couple local hockey games, going to some CFL games this year. I think that's going to be perfectly fine. I might even enjoy curling a little bit. I got no problem doing some substitute teaching, or I know there's got a couple local universities that I've already been in touch with who I could volunteer at, or there's a couple jobs there too. So I got no worries about finding something to do. And then I've always been saying this as a joke, but I think I might even be serious. I've always wanted to work at a Starbucks, so this could be my thing, So I'm looking forward to it. I don't know what I'm going to feel like in a couple months. You might see my name there again, in applying for some other AD jobs around the world. But 27 years overseas is a long time, and I think it's time to go back and be with family for a while.
Great decision. And knowing you, Kirby, you'll be just fine. You'll land on your feet and find something to do to keep you occupied. I know for sure, and keep you moving forward. So that's a great plan, and we wish you all the best, and I'm sure it'll work out just fine.
Thank you. Yeah.
Rick, what's happening with you for next year?
Yeah, it was really tough for me because, like I said, my family's Ukrainian, and we really want to go back home. I've been at PSI for 7 years. Before that, Pyro for 2 years. I was hanging on right to the very end to see what PSI was going to do, waiting for that good news that we were all going to return. But in the end, basically, I did have a look around for some jobs, and I applied, and I've been successful in getting an AD job in Norway, a school called International School of Stavanger. So I'll be studying there in August for 2 years, and seeing what happens with that position. I believe they're an associate member of CISA. So I'm still kind of connected to CISA in some ways. Yeah.
They're with Yanni.
Yeah, you're up there by Yanni. You're in that the Nordic League with him, right?
Yeah, I've been in touch with Yanni already about the Nordic League. He's already been in touch, and the AD at Oslo has also been in contact about a possible Norway league, because the costs are quite expensive flying from Norway into Europe. Yeah.
Well, that's cool, and still connected. And we were Rick and Matt. We were together at the NIAAA conference, and Kirby, I know you had talked about that. So maybe being in Canada makes it a bit easier for you to get to Nashville, and can stay connected that way.
Ooh, there's an idea.
Yeah,
hey, look at that.
No, that's one of the things. Obviously, with Globetrottin ADs in general, the connections around the globe, and somebody, and you stay in touch in all sorts of different ways, not just in the specific athletic conference that you're in. So that's great to hear, Rick, and I'm sure our paths will cross with all four of us. Yeah.
Yeah, and from the CISA perspective, just again, we've got some big holes to fill now with you guys parting ways, and we have another colleague, Joe Monks from Prague, who's moving on. So with that, I mean, like I said earlier, you guys' legacies will live on. The hard work you put in, the efforts you put in to make your kids' experiences better for their school experience at your respective schools, and I know for a fact that you guys won't be forgotten anytime soon. So all the best to you guys as you move forward from this. And it's crazy how it's worked out, but I know you guys will be just fine. Knowing you personally, knowing you professionally, and the spirit you'll carry forward is definitely going to be paying off for you down the road. So we just want to wish you guys all the best, and please stay in touch. And I'm sure we'll have you back on this podcast again at some time for an update to let us know how you're doing and the positive things you're doing down the road.
Hey, but before we go, people are out there listening. Maybe they're around the world and didn't realize all this is happening at all these other schools and all this around as you try to maybe get back to normal next year when everything blows over, whether in Warsaw or in Kiev. But if anyone's looking to help with any efforts specifically for your school or Ukraine in general, is there a site or a place, Rick, that you feel is a great one for them to go to?
Yeah, that'd be great. If people could go to our psi.kiev.ua, go to the community section, and we have a Stand with Ukraine page with multiple links about how you can help people in Ukraine, out of Ukraine, and the future.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I'll put the links down below as well, if you missed it in the notes. And Matt, I imagine with all the stuff you're doing, you have something else too.
For sure. So if you go to the AISB, American International School of Budapest website, that's www.aisb.hu. On the front page, there is a button that says AISB Cares. And if you click on that, you'll find all kinds of information about Ukrainian crisis support, what the school is doing in terms of the school within a school. There's also a donation page you can link to if you want to contribute. There's a lot of different ways. If you're in Hungary, by chance, if you're a listener there, there's a lot of information too about donations and other organizations you can get in touch with.
Of course, as we mentioned, the international school community around the world is becoming closer and closer every day. So any help from the greater community would be fantastic. So yeah, there we go. All right. Thanks again, Rick. Thanks again, Kirby. Matt, buddy. We won't need to take such a longer break till the next episode. We'll just got to get back at it now.
We're wrapping up season 3. Here we come.
Coach Evaluator is the premier coach evaluation software for schools and athletic organizations and preferred coach evaluation solution of the NIAAA and the Positive Coaching Alliance. The system is completely customizable with an always growing evaluation template library for athletic directors to reference. There are not only evaluations for ADs to use, but also self-evaluations and parent-player evaluations of coaches. Learn more about digitizing and simplifying your coach evaluation process by visiting www.coachevaluator.com. Mention Globetrottin ADs to receive a $200 discount on the yearly rate.
Kukri are a global multi-sport clothing brand specializing in providing the world's most prestigious schools with bespoke made and designed team uniforms for students of all standards and abilities. If you are frustrated by inconsistent colors, branding, costs, and sizing across your school's uniforms, then it's time to discuss an offering where every sport is available from softball to soccer for male and female athletes at rates to suit your budget. To find out how Kukri could elevate the apparel of your student athletes to a professional level, email the team at contact@kukrisports.com. A dedicated sales manager will offer you a quote today. Mention this ad and receive a special offer on your coach or PE staff order.
Until next week, this has been another episode of the Globetrottin ADs.